I'll do it that way. Hello, everyone. Today I am joined by Shara Senderoff of Gen Music AI. So, Shara, good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right.
Good
So
to
you,
talk.
yeah, it's gonna be. We have a lot to talk about today.
Yeah,
Lots of developments in the
your favorite
space.
topic.
Lots of developments in the
Yep,
space.
it is.
So first of all, where are you based?
I'm in LA.
Okay, so you're in Los Angeles. And how long have you been?
Part of it all.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
That's what I tell everybody because I'm asked by a lot of companies, okay, where is the action happening for generative AI and media content and entertainment
Yep.
content? And absolutely, it's Los Angeles.
Yep.
For
Music
sure.
is here. I mean, it used to be more split New York and LA, but
Yeah,
now it's leaning this way a bit more.
yeah, exactly. So I'm going to get into your background a little bit, Shara, but first, um, the two of us met just a couple weeks ago. And I had heard of Gen Music AI because I think it had just come out of stealth mode. And, everybody who listens to me and who reads my stuff knows that I follow the generative AI music space really deeply. And I'm very deep across music in any event and in generative AI and Gen AI. It's kind of funny because they
It
call
is.
it Gen AI,
Yep.
which may be intentional, but I'll ask you about the name. So I'm very familiar with the Sunos and Udios and all that, and we'll talk about that. But I'd heard of you all, and I heard of you, um, and what was particularly interesting to me was that a fundamental part of the way you market yourselves is that it's ethically trained. It's an ethically trained generative AI music platform, and I'm very much of the belief of, as you know, that generative AI companies they need to get consent and give compensation to the copyright holders, the creators on whose works they train.
Yep.
So when I saw that you're ethically trained generative AI music platform, that was fascinating to me. And when I saw you at this event, just serendipitously, and you and I started talking, I approached you and I got right into it. I
Yep.
like didn't get into the niceties,
Like
and
I'm gonna bust everything. Let
but
me tell you
you
what
were
I do.
you were great. You were great. You stayed patient with me. But I asked you, okay, what does that mean to be ethically sourced? Because I didn't get it exactly from your website. It wasn't clear to me what I was looking for. What I was really looking for was, okay, we've licensed a catalog of music, and then we had a conversation. So you tell me about what it means to be ethically trained generative AI.
The human language, right? All the nuances of words. You got to get right to the point. So here's the point. We have trained on 100% fully licensed music. Every single note in this platform that has been trained by our AI models has been licensed. Copyright owners are 100% aware. They are working with us. They have given us every single note, and that's what we mean by ethically trained. And ethical, right? You could argue the meaning of what ethics mean. And it really comes down to if you do right by someone, in my perspective entirely in this area. I believe that artists and creators have given their life's work to the music that they create. When you sit down and play an instrument like the ones behind you, you are putting your soul into what you're making. There is nothing easy about making music. Now, technology has made it a lot easier. We certainly will make it a lot easier, but the art of music requires a human being to add their artistry, add their experiences, their energy to it. And I personally fundamentally believe that if you are training on somebody's life's work or soul or energy, it deserves a fair compensation model if I'm going to take that and build something on top of it.
Yeah. And so, like you said, there's the ethical in kind of the sense that's more of a moralistic,
Yep.
spiritual almost way. But then there's the
Yep.
legal aspect to it. And on the legal aspect side, which I was kind of probing on when we first
Yep.
met, that every single thing is licensed. So there's consent and compensation,
Yep.
the two C's
Yep.
that, and that's what really immediately, drew me in, of course.
Yep.
So first of all, good
And
for you.
also, you know what there also is, which a lot of people don't take into consideration. There's also master versus publishing.
Yes.
And I think the reality here is that the music business is really nuanced. It's really complex. It has a long history of what it uses and why it uses it. And people aren't interested in doing things that are hard. The nature of what generative AI is easy, but the licensing part is not. It was not. It took me 2 years to do, which is why I launched when I launched. But there's a nuance of how the details of this break down and what you have to do in order to even license that people, I think, don't have an education and understanding of. And technology has a complete history of coming right into the music business and saying, we are going to change the way you do everything, and we are not going to take into consideration how you do it. But that, I think, was, and you and I talked about this, I think what my goal was is to show that there was a way. Was it an easy way? No way. But was there a way, and is there a way? Yes, there's a way, because I did it.
Yeah, no, good for you. And that's exactly right for everybody out there, that music IP is very complex. So there's the compositions, which is the publishing side. So for the writers, and then there's the recording, that's the master licenses. And, just today, fun fact, one of my music catalog deals was just announced. I've been involved in driving several of them. And so it was kind of a cool day because Half Pint, who's this classic reggae artist, I got to throw out this little promo because it was a big day.
Amazing.
Half Pint, who's a classic reggae artist who grew up with Marley, and one of his songs, Loving, was used by Sublime, the great band Sublime, for the song What I Got, which is one of their biggest hits. So when it comes to intellectual property rights, the big point is that I'm an IP lawyer by trade. I understand music very deeply. I'm involved in catalog deals. And so I live with the complexity of what you're talking about. And one thing that, and this we'll get into a lot of different things, but one of the things that is not understood, like you did the time to understand it, but there are a lot of Silicon Valley backed music generative companies that are technical people who don't necessarily understand the complexities of the music space, not only from the kind of the creative standpoint itself, but just the complexity of the IP that you were just talking about. And I want to get into a couple of them that I've written about a lot, and then I'm going to ask about the different approaches you have. But you're 100% licensed content, whereas you have two of the leading music generative services are Suno and Udio, both out of the Bay Area. One of them, I forgot which one, is backed by Andreessen, but very, very well backed in terms of the money that's been invested in these companies. And they have different approaches that we'll talk about, but they don't license the content. They train their AI on publicly available data, those 3 words, which we all knew what that meant. That meant that everything that was essentially available on the internet, everything available online, so music recordings and maybe even the metadata that associated with them. But we didn't know exactly. And I've asked both companies point blank, what does publicly available data mean? Does that mean that it is copyrighted music? And there was crickets. There was no response to it. Well, in any event, they were both sued about a month ago by the 3 major music labels. The RIAA actually filed a lawsuit on their behalf. And just in the last week or two, both Suno and Udio responded in court with their own papers. And for the first time, it conceded, and it said, and they used the words, "It is no mystery that we have trained essentially on the entire library of music that's available on the internet." So after deflecting the issue all this time, now they are conceding, I don't know if that's the right word, but they're actually very strongly stating that it's no secret. That was their words in their papers. It is no secret that that's what we do. And interestingly, and it was just my blog post today, they not only use those words and they claim fair use, that it's fair use to do that, but they also are trying to turn the tables and make the labels, the copyright owners, the bad guys. They're saying that the major labels are conspiring together to prevent democratization of music creation by essentially not letting individuals such as myself use services like Suno or Udio to be able to create whatever music I want. So it's almost like an antitrust kind of power to the people sort of argument that they're using in their papers, which is fascinating. And I'm going to throw out one more thing. And this is an interview of you, don't worry. But one more thing, just because I'm so deep in this stuff, that there was a, not in the music space, just came down yesterday. There was a major ruling from one of the federal court judges in one of the leading generative AI media cases, not a music case, but the same issues come up, where Stability AI was one of the defendants. There were others too, but Stability AI, the visual generator, and it was a class action against them. And Stability AI and the other defendants filed their motions to dismiss, which means that the plaintiffs, they have no case as a matter of law. So no evidence is needed. That's what a motion to dismiss is, just saying that under the law, they have no claim. Fair use wins, that this, that, and the other thing. So just yesterday, the federal court judge, who was not overly sympathetic to the plaintiffs originally, he had dismissed some claims, but given them a chance to amend their complaint. That's what it's called. He actually, it was a very big ruling in favor of the plaintiffs. He dismissed some claims, but for the most part, the copyright infringement claims survived under the motion to dismiss. So as a matter of law, they are viable. That doesn't mean that they're going to ultimately win under the evidence, but as a matter of law, they're viable. So they weren't rejected out of hand. So there's a lot going on in this space, and you're staying clear of it all by getting consent and giving compensation. So that's just some of the stuff going on.
So there's a lot to unpack, but first off, good for you, because you're clearly across every nuance and detail, and this requires people to be, your background gives you also an incredible lens with which to understand the complexities here. I think that if you're asking me to comment on all of that, how I'll comment is I'll say that everyone who's building anything has one superpower, and I think that that's choice. And they have a choice with which they build anything, and their approach to building something great. And my approach to building something great is to have the absolute best technology and figure out how that technology can be the best in market. And we built an approach technologically, which we are transparent as all hell about. We have published 3 of our research papers which give a full view into our technology approach. We obviously have a significant number that have not been published because we're patenting those. We have taken an absolute research-driven, technology-driven approach to what we're building, because our focus has been to build the highest fidelity audio output possible. I think that when you think about generative AI, so if we step back for a second and we think about what we're doing, we are truly generating music, composing music from nothing. This isn't a MIDI algorithm approach, which we've seen for years. Frankly, one of the things I think is the most amazing, and in a lot of ways, I have no judgment with what I'm about to say, but a lot of the technology companies who have been around for the last 10 years making innovations in music creation suddenly tacked AI onto the name of their company or their approach. And I'm like, what you're doing is not AI. It's simply a process with which you create something, but now you're jumping on the hype train. And so I think when we look at what's going on in the space, there are algorithm-based approaches to creating a new form of music, and then there's true generative music. And true generative music means that you are making something from absolutely nothing. It's an absolute original composition. And if we think about what that means, like think about the history of the music industry, which I grew up on blues and rock and roll. My dad was playing me Patsy Cline and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jeff Beck when I was in my crib. So my first concert was Aerosmith, and I watched Steven Tyler like dive and then fall into the crowd and actually hit the floor, probably drunk, and then got back up onto the stage with like, as if he didn't just hit the cement. And so, and we know where Steven's
I love
head
it.
probably gotten as a result of
Yeah,
some of
no.
these things. But this is how I grew up on music. And so my history, my dad has played the guitar since I was little. He has 30 guitars. He buys a new one all the time. He's been in bands his whole life. And I've always been really up close and personal to how the dynamics of music affect me as a human. And when I look back at the history and the evolution of instrumentation, and of course, in this space, we talk a lot about and a lot of people have different perspectives. Well, technology has been evolving the music business for a long time. That's absolutely true. We have seen music be recorded and created on different sorts of instruments. They've evolved to be more digital over time. But what's really interesting, and I was having a conversation with an amazing producer the other day who was telling me about how he has a computer from 10 years ago because it holds a particular sound in certain plugins off of original instrument sounds that were recorded in years and years ago. And so it's it's clear that what we're doing here is we are taking a long history of music creation and we're making it happen in the blink of an eye. And in order to do that authentically, you have to capture sonics and frequency in a way that not only forget paying homage to the past, but captures what humans have evolved their whole lives to. Obviously, unless you're hard of hearing, music has affected us all. It's truly a soundtrack to our entire existence on this planet. And so when we looked at what we were going to do with Jen, it was about how do we get the absolute highest fidelity? Because if I play you something shitty on my phone that sounds really low quality, you can barely hear what it is, you are not affected by that. It does not inspire you. It does not move you. It doesn't hit you. And so the critical nature of high fidelity audio, which to the commercial radio business is 48 kilohertz, that has a significant meaning. And so we knew that our approach was going to be absolute highest fidelity possible. And in order to do that, you have to train off of the highest fidelity possible. And so every note and track that Jen has trained on has been a waveform. And we were the first to market on a research paper that has now been cited by ByteDance and Sony and Meta around our approach to utilizing waveform audio to train Jen, an omnidirectional approach that allows us to listen to the composition not only forward and backward, but left to right and full circle, which gives us the ability to understand the frequencies in what we're training. It allows Jen to understand what comes before a note, what comes after a note, but then what is coming around the notes, which gives it the ability to be able to, in fact, like you could almost say it's psychically making the music and composing the music as it believes it should be based on studying the full spectrum. In order to do that and not lose fidelity, which happens when you compress audio, you need to start at the highest quality audio, a waveform, and then you have to maintain that quality as it goes down the funnel to ultimately go from a prompt that someone will put in to a generation. Now, to speak a little to the stuff that you said, and I'm sure we stand on the same side of the fence here, but when you strip music from the internet, you are getting a compressed file that has been compressed and compressed and compressed. It's got uploaded to YouTube, downloaded to YouTube. It's moved through a million different areas. So when you start with an audio file that's of lower quality, your only method to bring that quality up is to falsely change the resolution of that audio file. The methods to do that are not overly sophisticated and are not ultimately going to give you an authentic higher quality. So you have to start at the top, which we have no secret about. We believe if you want high fidelity, you got to start with high fidelity. But then separately, I think technology wins here in the sense that if you develop the best approach, so if we have licensed all of our music and therefore by default, you can estimate that we've trained on 20 to 50 times less music than those guys, yet our quality is higher. So what
okay,
that
so let me stop you there for a second. Explain how that is done, because we were talking about that before when we first met, that volume isn't as critical for you and you just said it, 20 to 50 times less music, but you get what you explain that, like help us understand that a little bit more.
Well, let's break it down simply. Think about humans. Humans who learn and study and know more about a particular thing are able to function at a higher quality. So if we have, simply put, if we have created an approach to our models that studies composition in a unique way, we have the best ability to understand that composition. And then if our technology allows us to maintain that high fidelity that went in, which means that, so what's happening? Let's break it down really simply. You come to Jen and you want to create a song. You come up with whatever prompt you want. So say you come up with blues, country with groovy loops, good for a bar in Texas. And that's your prompt. I'll let you write a prompt later. But say that was what I just
I
made.
will.
I made that your prompt. So that's your prompt. Now what's happening is that's going into an encoder that's understanding what you are saying, what you want to make, what that should sound like, all of the words that you put into that prompt. If you put guitar, if you put melodies, if you put groove, if you put bass, all the details of what you put, it's understanding that from a language perspective. And then it's ultimately going into our models. When our models train, so same way, prompt is going in from one side. On the other side, a composition is going in. It's being encoded so that Jen can understand what it means. When we study that omnidirectionally, that allows us to understand every frequency of what's been trained, every instrument, every composition choice that was made in those tracks. And then it's going through something that I haven't said out loud the name yet, but I will now, what we call the engine. And the engine is our innovation for maintaining the highest fidelity of understanding that composition, so that when the prompt generates the output, that output is coming out maintaining the highest quality of the compositions that went in. The prompt comes in, it assembles a composition based on all of the details within your prompt, and then it spits you out a prompt, a track to listen to. Our training data runs in parallel. So you're using an inference and we're training on the side all of those compositions. But when they're trained, they're being trained by our engine, which we believe is the best approach to maintaining all of the things that I just talked about. And that's where everyone has the ability to innovate their technology. And we're very public about how that's where we're focused. We believe that training data will ultimately be commoditized. That is not what makes this area special. What makes it special is understanding how to understand that training data and then putting amazing products on top, one of which you've seen, but I haven't announced publicly yet. So I'm going to have to come back in a short period of time because that product that you saw live has a really interesting licensing framework as well. So we have products that are coming in different licensing frameworks. So there's the underlying training model and how we license everything under there. And then there are unique products that will allow the consumer to iterate and perfect the tracks that they're making so that the first output is actually the starting point. You get what comes out based on your prompt, and then you're like, oh, actually, I want to change that section, or I want to replace this instrument, or I have an idea, I want to hum it, and I want to turn that into a track itself just from my hum. And so we have ways that we'll announce very, very, very soon that will bring rights holders in another level and commercial rights holders in a way that is manageable to license. And you know how complex licensing is because every song could have 40 writers or 40 publishers, and it's a nightmare. So we have come up with technology solutions that allow us to have creators participate in many different ways. So it's not just an underlying foundational training, but it's training in less use cases with even less material than we trained on before, because we just believe technologically, if we focus there, that's how we continue to lead.
So kind of in the style of, as an example, could be one of them.
In the
right?
style of could be
Okay,
anything.
so like, in the style of Grimes has her platform Elf Tech, and where she actually gives her stems and makes them available and her voice available to her fans, as long as if something commercializes it successfully, then she gets to share 50% of the revenues that flow from that. So presumably, so you can have, I don't know.
Grimes is a leader in that, and
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
really good example in market.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you could have a Gen client, or somebody could be an artist who wants to do a similar kind of thing using your platform.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So it's kind of enterprisey that way.
Yeah, and we're not, imagine if I said, fuck you to the artist, I don't care about you, I'm gonna steal all your music. Then what am I gonna go do? Tell them, oh, I'm sorry I stole your music, but I was covered by the law.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Not my approach, but to each their own. Go at it, and however you want to innovate the world, this is mine. And I
Yeah.
think that it's showing that it can be done well.
So we were talking about, and thanks for laying that all out. So let's go to Suno and Udio for a second. Not about that. We already talked about the law. We talked about the ethically sourced, and there's fair use arguments on their end. And how yours a differentiated approach just in terms of accessing the music on which you're training and making your product on top of. You kind of described your process itself. So how is that? How is like a Suno, Udio, and several of the other music generators that are out there? How are they doing it differently? I mean, you've alluded to it, but nonetheless, just like high level, very high level, that this is the way I understand it. They're scraping everything essentially, which means that the fidelity naturally is not going to be as pure as a wave file like you're getting. So you would argue, tell me if I'm right about this. You would say that the quality of the sound itself is going to be richer because of that. But apart from that, their model, you have a different approach to actually doing what you do, generating the music. So can you help explain that, just like juxtaposing it to what they and other music generators are doing, how they're doing it?
So I don't know what they're doing specifically. And they're not, I mean, I do know by the omission of what they've trained on large catalogs that it's highly probable they've trained on more data than us. So I would say that their approach technologically, I don't know the details of. The version of sort of how we focus is that, like I said, high quality is our goal. So if our goal is to get the highest quality, then we need to take the approaches technically that are going to get us that. That's effectively my view of the space. I think that I know that they've talked about their approach to using transformer models. Some of them have touched on that. I know that there are others using some version of diffusion the way we are using diffusion as well. But diffusion, it's not about the model per se. There are probably about 6 to 8 different approaches of how you can, different kinds of models that you could use to generate audio. If you break it down, it's pretty simple. You have to listen to a song. You have to understand the notes that are in the song and the chords. You have to understand the instrument choices. And then you have to ultimately be able to use a model that can get to that. A diffusion model, think about it like this. It diffuses to break through to the sound. So one of the ways I like to describe a diffusion model versus a transformer model.
Or by the way, just for everybody out there, this is getting kind of detailed, I know, but like when you're talking about LLMs, I think a lot of people think of generative as just being LLMs, large language models, but that's really, as I understand, like text focused, and we're talking about richer media. So like music is diffusion, or what else did you say?
Transformers being used out there. There are different neural network approaches to how you can use it. Some of the most popular are diffusion or transformer models. And so you're right. LLMs are language that's absolutely confusing. People think that AI in general is just ChatGPT.
Right.
It's actually an amazing thing. Like someone was like, I really want to get into AI. So the AI is ChatGPT, right? I'm like, well, that's one millionth of AI. But so yes, language models are different, and language models are used as part of the process because you're putting in language. You are typing a prompt, And so that language has to be encoded to understand what you're asking for. But then I guess to just give a simple highlight of two approaches to music, there's diffusion and there is transformer. Think about it like this. If I said, okay, Peter, I want you to make cookies, but for the diffusion approach, I'm going to just say the following to you. Okay, when you go into the kitchen now, there was probably some flour in it, maybe an egg, maybe some sugar, maybe some vanilla, and maybe some chocolate chips. And now you have to go into the kitchen and make your cookies. Then on the other side, I give you a straight recipe, which is transformer. You will follow that recipe to a T, which means that when a transformer model, and I'm oversimplifying to help everyone understand, a transformer model will read exactly what is in the song, a pattern of what is in the song. Whereas a transformer model, a diffusion model, will loosely say, okay, if I want to make a song, these are kind of the ingredients I had. I gotta figure out how much flour goes in, how much egg goes in, how many chocolate chips I want to put in, ultimately molding that dough mixture into some form of a song by basically saying, okay, now it's getting into a ball. Now I'm mixing the egg in a bit more. Now I'm mixing these things in a bit more until you whittle down to that cookie. On the other side, you are following every single line of that recipe to a T. And so when your song is created, it is highly probable that it is created based on a pattern and a recipe that it learned. And so there are different approaches and also different approaches technically. A transformer model that breaks audio down into what's called tokens will just simply learn differently. And this is why I think AI, and I know because I've read your stuff and I'm a huge fan of your writing and how you think about things. AI is not dissimilar than a human in the world. We all get information, and then we have the ability to dissect it, contextualize it, and understand how we want to process it, and therefore what we want to use it for once we've processed it. This approach in AI generative music is no different. You can take an approach that you believe is the better outcome, which is what a human does. And so I believe we took the approach that is the better outcome, and we have just no problem being transparent about it. Because
which is again, so you take the diffusion approach?
Yes, we are diffusion models.
Okay, and the diffusion, is it in just open source? Is that what you use?
No, we've built our models from scratch.
Completely. And I'm just curious, who is we?
Yes, I have a brilliant team of PhDs. My co-founder, Dr. Alex Wang, is a genius, an absolute genius. Born and raised pianist, loves music. So does my entire team. We have a big team of PhDs who have been conducting this research for 3.5 to 4 years. We've been deep into it. Like I said, we published 3 research papers. They're on our website so people can truly read our scientific and mathematical approach to sound. We iterate on these. We're working on, like I said, we have 20 other research papers in development. I have a brilliant team of engineers, everyone who loves music and just wants to focus on the best sound, because the best sound and the best product will allow creatives or anyone to be infinitely creative. What is coming out of Gen are just endless ideas for where you could go with something. And I think that's the beauty of all AI, really. Obviously, I'm an AI maxi, but because I believe it's going to change the world for the better. I think that if people have the ability to stop getting so stuck and there's something that can help them start and then be more efficient, they'll get more time back in their life, and maybe they'll use some of that time to better their communication skills or, things that are also helpful for humans.
Yeah, well, let's talk
We'll
about
go there another day.
Let's talk about the human factor some more.
Cool.
So you were talking about your father being in bands as an example, so a musician. And so, yes, it's democratizing, and you're doing it in a way that's ethically sourced and gives everybody the ability to create. And so a use case is an example. So my son's a senior at NYU Film School. He's finishing on one of his films. He was working with a composer at NYU. He has another film he's working on right now. I actually told him about you. I told him about Gen Music. You should check it out. So can he right now, or anybody, can you create a full Like what are the limitations right now? Because I know if you go to like a studio, last time I checked, it was like a minute, 2 minutes, something like that. It wasn't a it wasn't a full recording that you could create. I mean, maybe they've changed it since I last checked like a month ago, but are there any limitations, or no, I could create a full score or a full song or whatever.
So there's about to be no limitations on our end when we premiere our engine in a very, very short period of time. You will have no limitations to the amount of audio. You'll even be able to go down and say, I have a scene in my film that is 3 minutes and 13 seconds, or I have a scene that is 7 minutes and 28, or yeah, 7 minutes and 28 seconds, or an hour and 15 minutes. Create a single composition that long. You'll be able to get really,
and you can create endless iterations.
endless iterations. Right now, today, which will be for the next month, you can create 10-second ideas or 45 seconds, and then you can just keep extending those ideas, and Jen will keep composing. So there is a way seamlessly, which is one of the things that we pride ourselves on, is our continuation feature. Continuation allows you to either reprompt, so you get a 45-second track, and then you say, okay, I want to actually increase the BPM. I want to add guitar to this part. I want to change the genre. And it will continue to elevate based on what you prompt in. And the in between where it connected will be seamless. So there's no dropout, there's no pick back up. It doesn't change from a chord progression. It will just continue to build based on where you were before to your specifications, which is a wild thing.
And when is this all available?
That's all there now.
Okay, all of that. And
all of that is live.
And how about the unlimited?
That will be very soon, in about a month or so.
Okay.
So very soon.
Okay, you heard it here first. So we're recording this August 13th. So sometime by October 1.
Yes.
Okay, by October 1. And then what is your business model?
So I think there's a lot of ways to look at this. So it's B2C. There is a consumer play, and the consumer play is go generate music. You have no experience, or you have a lot of experience as a producer. You want to use this as a iterative part of your workflow. You want to just get an idea and then bring it into Pro Tools, or go further with what you want to do, or you have no experience. You just want to prompt out and then use different editing tools and different sort of simple versions of music creation, music production software. That's the consumer approach. Then, of course, there's a B2B approach. You can imagine that as we go, and I'll touch on this briefly because I know you and I talked
on the consumer side. How do you charge for that?
Credit-based or subscription.
Okay, credit-based. So you just like pay as you go, or a subscription?
Yeah, and that's pretty much the model across AI, unless it's a straight B2B API approach. Most of what we've seen thus far in generative AI is all credit or subscription. Okay. And that's because you have to think about like a lot of, which people don't really understand, but there's significant compute charges.
Oh yeah.
And that also talk about where technology comes into play. Like if you have to incur the computing costs, you need to be an open AI with trillions of dollars to be able to handle that capacity, unless you continue to come up with solutions to lower your computing costs by decreasing the amount of time that you need to compute. So there's a lot of paths, that there's a lot of technology and innovation coming in that space. I think where the world will be with that in a year is going to be just mind-blowing. Forget specifically with music, but I think over the next couple of years where compute will kind of change will be fascinating. But so we have B2C, then we have B2B. You can imagine that where the world is headed is that there are entities and brands and players that have a significant use case for a significant number of original music. And if we look back at history, it's time extensive and consuming to make the music that we use and see in a lot of our entertainment and content,
or marketing or anything.
And that's also kind of neglecting the massive multi-trillion-dollar opportunity that is the metaverse. So I think when we think about AI, it's a really interesting play, and I won't go down the rabbit hole of Web3, even though we are using blockchain to verify copyright infringement and our approach to making sure that we're ethical. We believe it's a technology that is critical in these types of use cases. But if we think about the explosion of AI kind of came along prior to that, Web3, crypto, and NFTs were really bubbling up. And then AI came in and everyone was like, perfect, the metaverse is dead. NFTs are over. Crypto will never have a life. Because they think AI took over. But AI exists to create an infinite number of things. Where does everyone think all that stuff is going to go? Where's the music going to go? Where are the type to asset characters going to go? When we have a technology on one of my other businesses where you can type to a 3D character that you can put into a virtual world. Where is all this going to go if there is no expansion of the internet? And so I think we're looking at a 10-year growth curve that exponentially increases the way we need content, and that content breaks down into visual experiences, into music, into the explosion of, talk about your son. I went to film school too, so I'm a product of making unbelievable content at the highest level. Is I pride myself on. I love to tell stories, and when I look at the tools that are coming down the AI video sector of the world, it's unbelievable to think about how much time it took us to make films and now where we're headed. And so if we decrease the time and we increase the content, there's going to be an increased need for music.
Yeah.
And so
Okay. I'm gonna take get back to the human factor a little bit, because I talk to artists all the time too,
Yeah.
and I know you do too. And so what do you say to the composer who has honed his or her craft for years and years and years, and now there's these tools like Jen that are available to everybody to be able to compose and create infinite versions? So what happens to the creators on the music side?
So I can tell you from personal experience that my perspective is very different to popular belief. Everyone thinks that these composers and individual composers and producers who have run production libraries and have been in sync and developing for film and TV forever are just going to be slaughtered, and that they're sitting in their homes like, no, please don't kill me. That's not happening. They're all working with me. They've all been in conversations with me about how this not only extends their catalog, it maximizes it because they can participate in training data. They can go on to shorten the cycle that they have to create music. So I think talk about the human factor. A lot of people are like, in general, from a broader standpoint, oh, AI is going to kill jobs, it's going to take away all these opportunities. In what world does an amazing person of amazing talent ever get replaced? No one is like, I gotta fire that person because they're the most valuable to my company. That's not what gets said.
I'm going to challenge that a little bit.
Yeah.
So like somebody like a Grimes who has a following, a fan base, she has, she has her own Grimesian music, and then she makes her stems and voice available for infinite number of versions or variations to be created.
Yep.
And I would say that for somebody like Grimes with an established fan base, there's not going to be anything competitive. It's expansive, new ways to monetize for herself, yet her fans are still going to want to hear purely Grimes music. For somebody who's a supremely talented artist, if there's just the sheer overrun of volume of generative AI music that's out there, there is the real risk of being drowned out so that your talent doesn't get a chance to bubble up, don't you think?
No, I think mathematically the ratio stays the same. Our superstars are our superstars, and the effort that you put in and the way you make something connect to people is a human trait that AI can't replicate. So if I'm an artist today and I go on Jen and I make a song, I'm going to add my vocals, not through Jen. We're not doing just drop any vocals in right now. We'll get to voice in our own way. But we believe that you create the beat. So say we take an artist, they make a beat out of Jen. Now they get on, they go write lyrics, they go write everything. They also have to bring it out into the world in a way that has a story. No one just accepts everything. We don't connect to things that don't strike a chord with us. I think that's where people seem, from my perspective, to be missing the fact that it still takes something special to cut through. And even if there's more music, that doesn't mean that those great artists and stars drown out. The great artists and stars break through. They find a way because the individual either works harder, has more to say, connects with a larger pool of people. And so I think we're talking about a couple different things. You're talking about the industry and an artist who wants to go be an artist and perform live. We've seen that evolve. We've seen the rise of the TikTok star, and a lot of those artists could not tour if they wanted to. They could not perform a live show if they wanted to. And so that kind of separates the talent quickly.
Well, I agree with you that the live element cannot be, supplanted, like that connection that an artist with the fan has. But if you are you're in the world of production music,
Mhm.
and it's kind of background music,
Yeah.
and for some, there's a real, it just is what it is. Instead of having 100, let's just make it up,
Yes.
100 creators or musicians who are creating background music. Naturally, with these kinds of services available, that number is going to be a subset of 100.
You're talking about the area absolutely that will be impacted first. And from my perspective, because I've been talking to those people for a long time, and there's not a huge number of them, there have been a good amount who have jumped into the deep end with me. They could have looked at it as, okay, well, you will replace us. And a lot of them said, we want to join you. And so I think that's like anything. You either jump and evolve with the times or you don't. And there are not many hero journeys and stories of the person who said, nope, I'm just going to stay on this ship and go down with it.
Well, look, okay. So I think for some people who are listening to this out there, I'm sure they're going to go, oh, that's candidly unsympathetic. But at the same time,
it's
I'm
sympathetic.
not.
It's saying,
No,
call me.
but what I counsel people all the time is this: no matter how you feel about it, musician, this is reality. We are living in a world where generative AI is here and it's not going away. Now, it needs to be done right. And this gets back to ethically sourced. That's my fundamental thing, right? And then there's going to be various use cases. Nothing, in my view, will ever replace the human factor that we talked about, which is that like a truly great song or something that breaks through is based on human emotion, and that cannot be replicated. The live experience cannot be replaced. So there is that. But for everybody, it's not going away. Learn the jargon, learn the language of it, learn the tools, play with Gen AI music, understand the capabilities. You may decide as an artist not to use it, which is fine because you have other ways to connect, or it's not important for you to have a mass audience or whatever it is. But for some people, it could create an entirely new palette of possibilities. And I'll give you an example. Since we're talking music and I'm a hardcore music guy, I have a separate podcast that's purely love of the game. It's called Story Behind the Song on Consequence. And, like yesterday, I interviewed The Church, which is, under the Milky Way. But I interview people from Lindsey Buckingham to Debbie Harry to Billy Idol to like all my idols. I get to interview. And one of my first interviews was with Gary Newman. And Gary Newman is seen by almost everybody as he's the guy who like really created synthesizer music and breaking out of punk music in the late 70s, early 80s. And he created an entirely new form of art using synthesizers. When he first started, the session musicians hated him because he was stealing jobs by doing that. And it's understandable, that emotion. It's totally understandable. Did his music actually end up cannibalizing maybe it did, but it created also an entirely new form of art that still resonates, doesn't take away from the other forms of art that resonate continuing on, but it's just different. And so like there is that reality too, that some may want to wish it away, but we've seen this before. And, like, here's another example in the world of animation.
Yep.
So hand-drawn animation, and then you have Pixar come in and everything changed. The world changed. So there is still some hand drawing going on, but for the most part, it just transformed everything.
And very few illustrators say, you know what, this approach of how we're currently making movies, we should stop doing it. And we should go back to when we were drawing every single frame. There's no one suggesting that. Change is talk about the human condition. It's called the human condition. We are opposed to change, yet we forget if you could go out and find 15-year-old Peter, is he out there? No, you can't find the 15-year-old you. He's not walking the streets.
I don't know if you'd want to find any form of.
Yes, no, I find that too. I probably would, because I find that fascinating. But
no.
we literally change, and so we're sitting here in a lot of these conversations, and I'm in them every day. Are no change, no change, but we're made as humans to evolve.
True, for sure. But it's daunting, and so understanding the.
Yes.
And for a purist, a composer who has honed his or her craft, spent years doing it and finally getting opportunities in the music world or whatever it may be, or the film world, And now the reality is there's other ways to accomplish things. It may have a different impact, but as budgets get constrained, as we all know, and budgets are continuously squeezed down, there's going to be more and more dependence or reliance or experimentation with these kind of tools. So naturally, there will be a lot of pain in the industry as new opportunities present themselves. It will be democratizing, yes, but at the same time, like none of us can minimize the pain or the passion. Like anytime that there's a story that's out and I post something, there are a number of like high profile artists who comment on them and are not happy with the developments that are happening. And, I think that it's like you come from a musician's perspective because you grew up around it. I'm very artist driven. And so I always, none of us can forget the emotion, and I still believe at the end of the day that again, like placing humans at the top of the food chain and believing, at least I believe again, that there's something sublime that comes from something that's created by a human that reaches another human. It just naturally is. But anyway,
I just want to touch on one really important thing.
Yeah.
Generative AI is not intended to be something that doesn't touch a human.
Yeah.
It's intended to just be an ideator that could create.
By the way, keep talking. I'm just letting my dog out because otherwise, keep talking. I'll be right back.
I'll keep talking. You can replace yourself with an AI version of you that's just nodding in the edit.
Here, I'm back. He's much happier now. He was starting to squirm.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Glad he's calm. He was getting
he's calm.
Anxious about AI music.
So I was getting anxious because I saw him.
Yeah. So the one thing I'll touch on that topic is that generative music is not intended to completely replace songs.
Yeah, of course.
Not at all how we're looking at it. We still believe that human artistry needs to impact the output. So does the Copyright Office. So I'm not really alone in that case. But I do think,
by the way, that's an important point for people to understand too, because we haven't touched upon that. If something's purely generated, then it's not capable of copyright protection. There needs to be human interaction. Yes, that's the state of the world today. How it will evolve, we don't know, because there's a lot of pushing to change that. But there's not a bright line either of how much human interaction is necessary. So that is an issue, because obviously if something's not copyrightable, then it takes away your exclusive right to monetize it.
Yep.
But go ahead.
Well, it depends. And yes, it's so nuanced, and that's where I think we're going to see everything. This is an entirely new world, as you know better than anyone. We're going to see regulations come down. We're going to see conversations being had. And I think that was the one point I wanted to make on what you were saying around artists and their view of this. I agree. There's an endless amount of compassion that has to be had for the evolution of what's happening right now. There is a tremendous amount of respect and homage that should go to the people that made us feel things in the world. And I think that the education and the conversation is more important now than ever, which is why I'm out there, as you've seen me out there in the world. educating on how it's being done, why it's being done, what my approach is, why I believe and how I believe artists can participate in it. I have yet to have a meeting with an artist, and I'm doing a ton of them, where by the end of the meeting, they didn't have a better understanding, feel less fear, and have ideas and inspiration as to how they could get involved. And that's part of the hard part about my job, is I have to run and build a technology company, and I also have to lead with compassion and educate. And these conversations are not 5 minutes. I'm going into the studio with artists and producers every day, and they're 2 to 4 hour conversations. These are not, oh, hey, let me just show you this thing. This is, why am I doing this? Who are my PhDs and brilliant engineers and heads of innovation that are behind me, making me be able to go talk about why we decided to do this and what decisions we made on the technological approach and whatnot. And so that's just sort of an end button to say it's an incredibly important conversation from every angle. The major labels, the publishers, the PROs, the performance agencies, live touring agents, managers. There is no one who is separate or should not be educated on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen to that. So a couple last questions. How many songs or recordings are in the catalog that you are training on?
We haven't said.
Okay.
Because it's kind of a secret sauce, but I can tell you it's 25 times at least less than what others are training on. Significantly less.
Okay. And that is, again, given everything that you've said, essentially people should think about it as 25 times less, smaller. Nonetheless, the quality is still going to be better because they're all WAV files, and you get sufficient music on which to train. And so I think you were telling me before we met, it's diminishing returns by, if you doubled it, it wouldn't make that much of a difference to the impact.
I think here's a good way to think about it. Certain types of AI, language models, for example, if a language model, ChatGPT, read one book, think about how much it would know. Not that much. So they're called large language models for a reason. They need a large amount of data. That same thing doesn't apply to every type of AI model. And so we believe that our approach to how we've built our models allows us to get a high quality output on a far less amount of data than people would assume is needed. And I think that that is the art of what we are doing and have done. And that has allowed us to execute in performance in a way that exceeds what's out there. And people are touting that you need tens of millions of songs. The reality is,
which is, by the way, and that's what the other guys are doing. I mean, right? Yeah. The other guys are, as we were saying, they're scraping everything because presumably they feel that the more that they scrape, the better their results will be. Is that right?
Possibly that's their philosophy. I think that, again, it's hard to say, but what they have said is what their philosophy is. That they are standing on the side of fair use. And I'm not the court, so I can't decide. All I can decide is that I know it's possible to do this the right way. Yeah. And by even right, I'll just say ethically and compensate artists, because I don't even want to put right or wrong. Like, they took a different approach than me. It's just different. But I do believe that if you're aiming for high quality and you're aiming for insane generation speed and performance and keeping fidelity in a place that is comparable to what's on the radio, and you want to have great products that can be really creative in this space, you can do it by licensing.
And be artist friendly.
And be artist friendly.
That, because we're talking about art. We're talking about art. You know, this is not data. And I would say that many in the generative AI space think of content as just data, training data. This is art. Like, this is the product of human creativity, blood, sweat, and tears. And so for all the reasons you said, it's not right or wrong, but the emotional aspect, your story is going to be fundamentally different to an artist because of that than if, from somebody else who just answers the question in a different kind of way. So, and then and it never hit me before. So Gen Music is because it's generative AI. I never understood why it was JEN. So Gen Music is JEN. And by the way, your marketing, just the way you guys present yourselves online, I think is really elegant and beautiful. So kudos to you. And then
that's the big thing. But it's also like Jen, your friend in the studio. Like everyone has a friend named Jen. So it's like your friend in the studio that you can collaborate with. And yes, it was Jen for generative. And we came up with it 4 years ago. So it just took us a long time to license. No, it didn't take 4 years, but we've been building for a long time.
And then final question, we got right into it, but a little bit of your background.
Yeah. So the very short version is I went to film school, came out and wanted to be a movie producer, ended up sort of, as the universe would have it, right place, right time, as an assistant, ended up selling a movie directly to Spielberg. And that kind of catapulted me to being promoted, to say the least, to being a film executive. And I was just sort of always interested in how we were going to monetize content, how could we transform it and understand audience. So spent a few years developing full studio movies, $30 million budgets to $100 million budgets. I worked for a big film and TV producer, Mark Gordon, and developed my own slate of movies at that company, and kind of looked at how we were ultimately going to get consumers into the theater. And when I saw a hole in the film and sort of entertainment business as a whole around understanding the data for consumers, I turned to the internet and started creating short form content that could allow us to create short form shows that would ultimately allow us, leveraging the internet, to track who was watching it, which could allow us to make better decisions for what we put money into, to spend $30-50 million and ultimately put those movies into theaters beyond that, with somewhat of an education on who might like this and an ability to de-risk that significant investment. That was before Netflix and Hulu came around. So I kind of rode that evolution into short form content. And then I launched a startup that was, no surprise, reinventing something. It was reinventing the paper resume. It was like a pre-LinkedIn that allowed interns to apply to internships in really hard to break into industries, one being music. Made a ton of relationships, ended up selling that company, and through all of those relationships, ended up consulting for a lot of major players in music. And that gave me kind of this parallel entertainment. Okay, we're creating hour to 2 hour long pieces of content. Now we're creating 1 to 2 minute songs, pieces of content nonetheless. And how are we going to find audience on the internet? And so that led me down a music industry rabbit hole. And because simultaneously I've always been interested in technology before it's ready for the masses, I got really interested in blockchain in about 2015. And it led me to start talking about blockchain and technology and how it could impact music. And I launched a fund about 5 years ago with Scooter Braun called Race in Space. And my focus was entirely on investing in technology companies, metaverse infrastructure, blockchain, and AI. And so I started looking at AI about 5 years ago, made an investment in a company that ultimately I ended up acquiring. And that team under that company started Gen with me about 3 years ago. So it was a really natural progression of studying kind of the bridge in entertainment, the gap in understanding the nuances and the rights, and how you really take IP, which could be individuals, human likeness, it could be a piece of content, and bring that to the masses and leverage technology to do that in really interesting capacities. So I've sort of always been hybrid venture capitalist, entrepreneur, and just willing to go headfirst into things that are hard. And turns out in this stage,
a true entrepreneur, that's for sure. So, and this is self-financed, right?
Yeah, my co-founder Aaron and I financed this out of a fund we have called Born Ready. And so this team, it was incubated out of our Futureverse venture. So I have a venture called Futureverse that's a metaverse infrastructure and AI company. And my co-founder Aaron and I, and our co-founder Dr. Alex, who has led all of the innovation at Gen, we sort of built it stealth over the last couple of years. We self-funded the seed round, and we knew that we were seeing a version of the future that would take a little bit of time for people to understand. And so we wanted to get going. So we did, and now we're out in the world and now we're flying.
There you go. Raising capital.
Raising capital. We're always raising capital. I'm an entrepreneur.
Entrepreneurs are always
capital.
we're always raising money, man. Okay, so we're talking about music. I have to ask you, name a couple of your favorite music artists. Your
Aerosmith.
Okay.
Aerosmith. Right. I mean, I'll go back to my OGs. I mean, today.
Yeah, today.
I'm across all genres, but Zach Bryan, huge fan of. Obviously, I'm a Swiftie through and through. Everyone who knows me knows. But I go back to like Jimmy Vaughn, Stevie, you name it, blues, Bonnie Raitt. Like I love it all. There's really not a genre that I'm not into. I think that's kind of the thing. If it moves you, then it affects you. But definitely getting more into the sort of country lane recently.
Okay.
It's all fun. And a lot of my friends are producers and artists. And so there was not a world that I would stand on the other side of the fence here.
Yeah. Very good.
Yep.
Well, great to have you, Shara. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Everybody, Shara Senderoff, check out Gen Music. What is the URL? It's
genmusic.ai.
And remember that's Gen, Jen.
Jen.
Genmusic.ai. Great to have you on. Thanks for talking it all through.
You have all of the knowledge, and it's amazing to have someone like you out there having these conversations with everyone, because people need to know what's happening. So thank you for having me.
Well, I appreciate it. It's fun. There's so much going on, but it's also like, it's great to start kind of big picture and go down, and you're the entrepreneur, you're making it happen. You're putting it all out there. So good for you. Good for you.
Appreciate it.
And we'll keep the conversation going, but thanks
for sure. I'll be back with more products.
Yes. We'll be looking for it.
Awesome.